We always enjoy having Ellis Johnson on our show. And Coach, I don't know if Mike told you or not, we got a surprise for you. But I don't know if that surprise is going to have a shirt on or not. It's your former quarterback, Stephen Garcia. He'll be here in a second.
Well, I'm prepared. I've done a couple of podcasts with Stephen before.
Sounds like a man that was worn out each time with the process.
Well, it was Eric Kimry, and it was about four of us, including Stephen. And the first thing Eric says, now remember, guys, this is a podcast, so if you make a mistake, we can edit it out. Don't worry about cuss words or anything. And I'm like, holy cow, why would you tell Garcia that? So after they got through editing, and I'm pretty sure it was about 5 minutes long.
That's fantastic. But before we dive into things, Ellis, I know we spoke last week, and I didn't realize this, but your son, the reason you couldn't join us last week, he's at Murray State. So you were in the car and getting ready to see him. Tell us more about what your son is doing over there.
Well, he went up to Murray State. He's a graduate assistant with Jody Wright, of course, who left the Gamecocks. And really good group of guys. Jody worked for me at Mississippi State, and I think he's having a great experience there in a tough conference there in that Missouri Valley. Missouri Valley, and about 5 of the top 15 1AA teams are in that conference. So they got whacked pretty good by North Dakota State, but he's learning a lot, and it's a great experience for him. So long drive, guys. They need an airport out there. A little bit closer to Murray.
Yeah. When you said you were driving, I was like, how many hours is that in the car?
If you have good luck with everything going through Atlanta and Nashville, you can't make it under 8, maybe 7.5.
No, and
coming back took us right at 10 hours because we caught Nashville and Atlanta at the wrong time.
You're never going to have good luck going through both Atlanta and Nashville. You're going to have at least one nightmare and often two.
Where's he coaching? What position group?
He's working with the wide receiver coach.
Okay. All right. Does he ever does he call you for advice and then Jody tells him something? He's like, hey man, my dad told me that the way you're doing it's not right. This is how.
No. No. Jody's more likely to call me than Eli. But he used to talk football with me a lot, but they're keeping him pretty busy over there. So I think he's got his hands full. Plus, I know about as much about wide receivers as he doesn't need to ask me anything. And then my walk-on son up at Clemson, he wants to go out and play wide receiver. I said, son, it's not in the genes. You need to try linebacker or tight end or something.
There's a lot of things. We had you on the off season, and you were terrific, and so many of our listeners and viewers were just ecstatic about what you had to say, and we went down memory lane quite a bit, and I know we'll do that with Stephen as well. I do want to jump into the here and now first off the bat, because we haven't had a chance to have you react to what you've seen from this Carolina defense, which is clearly special. As you watch them, what makes them so special? Who stands out to you, and did you have any idea that this group would be this good?
Well, the roster changes so much in between seasons, and I don't keep up with recruiting very much. So I had no idea. I mean, I couldn't name 10 players on their team. Mm-hmm. But the thing that jumps out at you immediately is how destructive the front four is. And of course, I'm a little bit partial, but I think one of the best hires Shane has made since he's been there is Travian Robertson. And he hadn't been the key to that outside edge rush, I think, is talent. But they're getting good coaching, too, because I know he's probably tough on them and gets the most out of them. But I think their interior line has shown vast improvement these last 2 seasons since Travian's been there. So that's the thing that jumps out. The rest of their players are good, and they're making plays. And it reminds me a lot about when we were there. The edge players are the guys that create all the destruction. And we had really good perimeter players who could take open field.
Yeah.
No. Our first drop.
Kind of lost it first. I'll pick it up there real quick. It's a great question. There you go. Can you hear us, Coach?
Yeah, I apologize. If I get a call, I'm on the cell phone, so if I get a call, it kills it for about 10 seconds, so y'all have to bear with me.
You're too popular. That's the problem. We
Well,
need to.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Coach,
think this is I think it's a loan department, call it.
I want to include your. It's a great. Mike asked. It's a great question. Because it's always interesting to get the perspective of guys who understand it, to be able to kind of evaluate their peers, like you're doing, evaluating this defense led by Coach White. But to bring Stephen into the conversation too, I was very apprehensive. You could see early some similarities to that great group that y'all had. There's no doubt. But you don't want to come out and say things like that. It's not necessarily fair to the kids until they prove that they deserve to be in the conversation. I think they have proven that, Stephen, this group. You used to go up, all those guys that from that era, obviously, those are your buddies when y'all set the tone for what Carolina football could become here. And obviously Coach Johnson coached them. When you go back and you look at that group, the Ingrams and the Devin Taylors and all the interior guys, Byron Gerardo, et cetera, and then you look at this group here, what similarities do you see?
First off, what up, Coach?
How you doing?
Good, man. Good.
I've been waiting on my invite for your podcast.
Well,
Come.
hold on. We're getting there. We are definitely getting there. We got to get you on, man. And the same thing. They're very hesitant on the cussing. So unfortunately, I gotta watch my mouth. They do a lot of editing though. But yeah, JB, to answer your question, man, it's definitely similar. I think as Coach Johnson just mentioned, I think hiring Coach Travian was absolutely huge for that development and just recruiting in general. So it's hard to really watch interior defensive linemen. I don't really watch it. I watch more of the offensive side of the ball. But you can definitely see that there's a lot of similarities, especially on the outside guys as well.
Coach, what aside from talent though, like this group that Mike asked about has great leadership and a lot of maturity. A lot of guys have played a lot of ball, right? They've been around a while. Like what was that? What is that like on defense? Like where do you generally want your leadership to come from? And how does that, I guess back when you had that defense that was so elite, like aside from talent, what else made them great? I guess is what I'm getting at here.
Well, you hit it on the head. It's leadership within the players. And sometimes they're just natural. And sometimes it's the way you handle them and develop them. I don't want to get off on a tangent, but this portal stuff and all this transferring, I think it'd be much more difficult today to build that kind of chemistry and that kind of work habits and all the things. And I go back and circle back to Travian. I can guarantee you on the practice field, he's demanding that kind of work habits and that kind of toughness and so forth. I ran into Clyde Wren last year right after their season or close to the end of the season. It said some of the defensive line parents were calling in complaining about the way Travian talked to them. Well, I said, well, leave him alone because he's probably going to end up helping them. But
Wow.
That's where just constant demanding the best on the practice field, and then it'll show up on the game field. I'm a big believer of that. Coach Spurrier used to be, when coaches have been degrading the players and blaming them for something, he said, well, I always think the players will play very close to the way you coach them. And what he was trying to say is, dude, you coach them, they're your guys, and they're a reflection of you. And I think that's very important. You see it happening on the game field. It's been happening on the practice field time after time, whether it's a personal foul after the whistle or jumping off sides or dominant physical effort. It's going on the practice field, and that's why it's going on the game field.
Ellis, obviously there's been a talent upgrade from last year to this year. The pickup of Kennard, the true freshman standout in Stewart, really at all three levels, they have enhanced what they have. I'm curious because I think back a year ago, and it's hard to just wipe this from the memory. There are a lot of people that wanted to change at the DC. The defense was not great, and there certainly was talk about, well, maybe the scheme is just off, and then they tinkered with it. It got better late, and that was actually the highlight last year. Do you see anything differently from a year ago to this year schematically that stands out? We know the talent's better, but what about from a scheme standpoint?
Well, how much I've watched, I see a little bit, but I think it's basically utilizing the talent.
Mhm.
The only thing I remember last year, what you referred to, I remember them going to some odd front.
Mhm.
And anybody can do that, teaching wise or drawing it up if you've been coaching 10, 15 years. All this multiple and all that stuff, anybody can teach that. The problem is you put kids in positions they can't play well with physical technique, then you're just throwing, you're throwing things against the wall, hoping something sticks. But it could have been that they felt like the kids they had last year, they weren't getting it done in a full front. They had a player out there. They've got a better linebacker needs to be on the field. You find the best way to get them on there with personnel/scheme. Now, past that, it's so hard for me to watch them and more than like a half of the game now because they got all these other games on. And I'll try to record games and watch them later. And you know how it is. 2 days later, you don't want to watch the game. You've heard so much about it. So it's crazy, but you can't watch as much football on each team as you want to because you're trying to watch 6 different games. So
Yeah.
I can't sit here to evaluate them or talk about that, but I just think the personnel upgrade has helped them be able to do what they've been trying to do and do it better. Clayton White's not been doing a bad job since he's been there. But if you don't have horses playing in that league, you're going to have long runs. You're going to have people getting beat deep. You're going to have missed tackles. And everybody can say, well, they need to start working on tackling. If I'm trying to tackle uh, Walter Payton, I don't need to work on it because it's not going to happen. And I mean, that's pretty extreme, but I'm telling you, if you don't have athletes on the defensive side, it doesn't matter what you line up in, they can't finish plays because they're just not quite good enough. And I think I agree with you. There's been a talent upgrade. I was concerned about how many new faces were coming in there, before this season. And they've had their ups and downs. And I think part of it is too much transfers, too much new faces and so forth. And it is almost impossible for coaches to handle that. Look up there at Vanderbilt, and I think they said they brought in 52 new people. And they don't have a lot of problems with execution and behavior and discipline and all that. You look down at Florida State, and it's a debacle on the same type of turnover. So I guess it matters not only who you get, but what kind of characters they are. But I think the talent level is what has, improved Carolina's defense. The coaching and the strategy and all those other things were always there.
Yeah.
Does the
It's
Kennard kid remind you of anybody?
I mean, you could bring up comparisons and things, but I haven't watched him enough to say that.
Yeah, that's fair.
It's hard for me to sit there and say, well, he looks more like him. He looks more like him. But he's obviously a really good player, and so is Stewart. And Stewart's a lot younger, maybe not as consistent, but they're both. I mean, it's hard to handle those two guys if you're going to get in a pocket passing game.
You mentioned the new players and stuff. This is a question you and Stephen can answer together. I'll let Garcia go first, and then y'all just bounce off. But you bring in all these players, like you pointed out. In some places it works, some places it doesn't work. Y'all know Shane, and we all know Shane, but y'all know him way better than any of us do. Clearly, have long-standing relationships with him. What is it about him and his ability to be able to get these guys, in the same boat, Stephen, on the same page, and not let things like what's going on down at Florida State happen, or that we've seen places like Arkansas over the years and things like that since the portal has kind of been there. He's been able to bring guys in and keep them together and focused and out there trying to achieve the same mission. What is it about Shane?
I mean, I think it's palpable how he genuinely cares about the players. And I think that stems from guys like Coach Johnson. I think he genuinely cared about his players. And when you're an 18-year-old kid, you can feel that when somebody's they're demanding that you're gonna, do the right things and play well, but they're also kind of loving you on the side and kind of loving up on you. I mean, you got to have that kind of balance. And I think Coach Beamer's doing that. I mean, obviously he's doing it because he is keeping guys here, and I think he's recruiting really well, especially when you got, guys up in the upstate that are, in the constant, they're constantly in the college football playoffs. So, to kind of have an in-state rival that you got to go against and compete against every single year, not only to beat them, but also to recruit with them and, keep these guys, in that locker room. I think it's a testament to how well he is, not only on the field, but off the field.
Coach, do we see the same Shane Beamer that the team sees? Like he's, you know how he is. He talks to the media. You send him a text, you get a bunch of exclamation points back. He's very happy, very go lucky. But behind the scenes,
I've got a rule. I never text head coaches because I've kind of been in that office in that arena. And if I was a head coach, I wouldn't want text coming in. And so I don't send, hey, great job or tough loss or anything. I don't really text with any of them. But, the first full-time coaching job Shane had, I went to Mississippi State with Sly Croom, and I was going to coordinate the defense, and he told me he had somebody come in and coach linebackers, and I needed to coach secondary. I'd never coached them in my life. So he wants me to come in with SEC school and coordinate and coach a position that I've not coached. I didn't feel uncomfortable about it. The only thing I would never want to coach is quarterbacks. But I wouldn't know anything to tell them other than you throw it with the wrong hand. So I was given the safeties, coordinate the defense, and my cornerback coach was Shane Beamer. And he'd never been a full-time coach before. He'd been a GA. And I don't know what he worked with before. It didn't matter to me. I played for his daddy in college, and I've known the family for 47 years. And I knew a lot about Shane, but had never worked with him. And we took the secondary, two guys we never coached those positions, and did a good job. And all I've seen from then right up until the time we worked together at South Carolina is just he's enthusiastic, he's demanding, but he's very positive.
got a phone call.
Those damn lawn guys.
That's damn loan guys. Whatever it is, it's not going to be as good a deal as Troy Branham. I'm just going to say that. Golden Gate Mortgage. Right. Give him a call. By the way, Stephen, while he's figuring that out, what was your cut bet? What was your big cut win?
Oh shit!
Cash in.
I to be honest, man, I hate to say this, on there, man, but I bet way too much to kind of to remember any of them. That's probably good for your opponents. Sometimes not so much.
Get you after a 6-pack or two. Ellis, can you hear us again? Are you?
Yeah, I'm finally back. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we hear you fine now.
Yeah, I apologize.
That's okay.
If you'll buy me a laptop, I'll start using that instead.
See if we can get that in our budget.
Yeah.
That and the ball of a watch, like the old Braves.
I might need Starlink too. But,
okay, we got Elon.
What I was saying, I'm just adding on to what Stephen had said about him, and he's a very positive person. At times, I'd say,
"Oh no." We got to get Coach the do not disturb button going on.
I know.
That's
Stephen,
so funny.
My point was like, hey, go ahead, Coach. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I hope y'all didn't get those profanity on there. But I would tell him. I told him because I said, dude, you're gonna have to tighten up on these guys. They're not responding, and it was just a difference in the way he handled them or whatever. But and the energy in recruiting. I mean, you can't leave that out because it's just constant now. It always has been important, but I mean, this damn portal and you're recruiting all the time now. And he's had a ton of energy with that. And I think the other thing is consistency. He's been what he is, who he is, and he's been Shane from the first day. And when it wasn't winning, everybody thought something was wrong. And now that he's not necessarily not winning, but they're playing really well. And I think people understand that he's a good leader and a good coach.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mike.
No, I was going to ask a question about Saturday's game, and the crowd is just going to be electric. You were on the sidelines or in the booth, I guess, for a lot of those. But I wonder, as a defensive coordinator, how much in today's game would you hate the fact that the quarterbacks now have the ear earpiece there where they can communicate with the sideline. It takes away a little bit of that advantage, does it not? That they now can hear everything they need to, regardless of how loud the crowd is.
I guess, Mike, I've never used them, obviously. So I'm hearing now that some college coaches are having a problem with them. That because of the way the college game is, coaches like to be able to signal to the quarterbacks, and you don't see the pros freeze count and look over to the sideline for a play. Well, that's a very common mechanics in college football,
Mm-hmm.
and you have the rule where the sound cuts off at a certain time, and it's
Right.
cutting out some of the most critical communications that these coordinators have with their quarterbacks. I know there are a lot of defensive people just quit using them. They tried it in the spring and didn't even use them in the fall. And some of them have now, over the first 2-3 weeks, they've just said, hey, I can do it better the other way. And if you got a good player out there who can quarterback it on both sides, I don't know what kind of advantage it is. I do understand it with the pros. If you ever read a pro football play call, I mean, it really would help them, but I don't really see the difference in college. I really don't.
That's interesting. You're the first person I've heard say that particularly on the defensive end, a lot of guys, I'm guessing more times than not, it's in a linebacker's helmet. You get to pick one guy. You're saying a lot of them have just decided let's just scrap it and use the old hand signals. That's working better anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll tell you what, I would absolutely hate if I had Coach Spurrier in my ear. Oh my God! I would say, hey, I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
Even though you could.
Oh, absolutely. I'd say we got to get this thing out of here.
Hey, Coach, what did you ever encounter a moment with Stephen and Coach Spurrier where you're like, yeah, I'm not getting involved in this?
No. Stephen always likes to tell this story. When I first got there, we were practicing. Coach was running gases or something across the field. And we're walking along. We're checking the line to make sure everybody touches and all that. Anyhow, a couple, 3 of them were just cutting up or something over there. And I can't remember what Stephen said. And I don't remember this, but he said, I said, hey, will you cut the bullshit? He said, you ain't even played an SEC game yet. So he probably looked up and said, who is this gray-headed son of a bitch?
I'll tell you what. So I just met him, and I think I forgot. I was running next to Lottie Ajiboye, and I was replicating Coach Fitz, and I was saying, go, and getting Lottie was jumping off sides. And you came over there, and you said, I mean, I can't repeat exactly what you said, but it was something along those lines with a little bit more profanity. And I looked up, and I was like, holy shit! All right, I better cut this shit out. He ripped my ass. I was like, all right, well, welcome to the SEC.
One thing Stephen didn't know is I was pretty good friends with his dad, just from a link. He would come up a lot of times and spend several days, and he liked to hunt. And one of our Carolina alums down there, Somerton, would always try to arrange a hunt. I don't know what the hell they were hunting, bird, deer, I don't know. I don't go hunting, but I hunt, but I don't hunt animals. And his dad got to be friends with a group down there. I had some cousins down in Somerton. And so I knew him, we'd always talking and so forth. And it was funny for me to keep up with both sides and hear all this stuff. And sometimes I didn't know what was going on. And Mr. Garcia would tell me, said, they had another session the other day. And he's about at the end of a rope with Stephen. I said, he better re-grab the damn rope because we need Stephen.
I'll tell you what, Coach Ellis, my dad is texting me right now. He's like, hey, please have Coach Ellis call me when you guys when we get done with the podcast.
I hope they didn't. I was worried about them, the hurricane the other day. I assume they still live down in that area.
Yep. We're down here and we survived.
Oh, I guess Coach hasn't seen your infamous hurricane video.
I guess not.
Oh man,
we'll send it to you, Coach.
Text him. Text that bad boy.
Yeah,
Coach. Since you mentioned that time frame, how often do you speak to Coach Spurrier, and what's the nature of those conversations? I'm curious.
I haven't talked to him much, and I'm not a phone guy. If we don't have some kind of thing that we happen to bump into each other, or we were trying to do something, we called for each other's help or something. So I have literally have not talked to Coach Spurrier maybe in 2 years.
Yeah.
And which is not unusual for me. I don't know about him, but so I really haven't talked to him lately. Somebody was down the other day, and I keep up through other people who see him a lot, and so forth. And it's always about golf. He's mad because his hands are bothering him with arthritis or something, but he still loves to play golf.
Yeah, I want to ask you, Stephen. You okay for a couple more minutes, and we'll let you go. You all right with that?
Yeah.
Obviously, we talk about LaNorris Sellers with you a lot. LaNorris is this week's guest on Tailgate Talks, which we're waiting on Coach Fink to approve from what Dakota told me. So that should be out sometime today. Pat, Stephen, and LaNorris. Stephen, I personally think, and Coach, I know you didn't coach quarterbacks, but you had to defend them. So obviously you're pretty valuable in these conversations. I think when you look at all the young quarterbacks, I'm not saying all the quarterbacks, the young quarterbacks in the SEC, I haven't seen one progress the way he has this year. I think he's gotten better and better and better. The bugaboos were the turnovers, the silly things, clearly. But from day one to where we are going into week 8 here, I guess game 8 for week 10, I think it is for South Carolina. I don't think that there's a young freshman that has improved the way that he has improved, Stephen. He's going to get his first start under the lights of Williams-Brice Stadium Saturday night versus an SEC and a very good one opponent in the Aggies. What's the moment going to be like for him, and evaluate kind of where you think his play will be, especially coming off of the bye week to get prepared for it?
Well, just talking with him last week and, getting a chance to talk to him more on a personal level, it was really cool because everybody knows him as a football player, but not a lot of people know who he is like off the field. And he's as calm, cool, as collective as you could possibly be. I know we talked about this last week, but he's just ultra, confident and got his head on his shoulders. And that's something you don't see at that early stage at his career. But looking back to, I think it was Perry Orth had a question. It was like, in your first 5 starts, you played against 2 top 10 opponents. So now he's got another top 10 opponent in A&M. So, he's had the kitchen sink thrown at him, and I think he's handled it extremely well. I think he's kind of learning on the fly. And as Coach Ellis told me, man, once you get into the SEC and you kind of get popped for the first time, it changes your whole perspective on college football and life in general. I'm not sure if I want to keep doing this. But yeah, I think he's progressed extremely well. And, you can talk about the turnovers all day long, but I see a kid that, from the Old Dominion game where he's taking that first read. If it's not there, he's hauling ass and running to now. He's going from first read to second read, boom, check down. And it's happened, extremely rapid. And that's what happens, when you have the live bullets coming at you, you start learning a little bit faster. So, I think he's progressed immensely since week 1.
What do you think about LaNorris, Coach?
I, of course, haven't seen him as much as Stephen has, and I think Stephen's evaluation as an ex-quarterback is excellent too. The thing I've noticed, though, I like his demeanor, and even in the early part of the year where he was really having a lot of problems and everything, securing the ball and all that, he just, you could tell he was always open to correction and never intimidated. And whether, even when he played badly, it didn't bring him down. And then when he made big plays, he did act like some, Heisman winner because he completed a pass. And I see a lot of kids are up and down, up and down. And for me, Stephen can tell you better than I can. But for me, to be a quarterback, I don't think that works well. You got to be consistent, and I'm talking about with the control of yourself, your emotions, your thoughts, your keys, your read. I think that all goes together. And you can be different personalities from player to player, but when the player himself is changing personalities all the time, and I see some of it in the conference, and I see some of it with older quarterbacks, and I think it's a big factor. I'm gonna be surprised. I told someone 3 or 4 weeks ago, the kid reminds me of Milroe. Now look what Milroe was last year, first 3 or 4 games. Saban sat him down at South Florida and was willing to almost lose to a lesser football team to make sure he got the message that you're going to play within the system, and you're going to take care of the ball. And then from then on, he's been hard to handle. He's
Yeah.
had a couple of bad games this year, but hadn't had those big swings like he used to. And I see the same thing with LaNorris. I think he's got tremendous physical skills, and I think he doesn't know a lot of football yet. And he's young. He's going to get
Right.
better.
That's 100% accurate.
That's the exact analogy I made literally with Milroe and the struggles he had early on in Alabama, which you have to live with. And all Nico right now can't hit the broadside of a barn at Tennessee, and he's a freshman and he's having struggles. I mean, it's just the nature of the beast. Like you've got a lot of guys who are first year starters in this league. You're going to get humbled, and you're going. It's so often you're going to make mistakes, but it's the gravity of the mistakes, right, Coach? I mean, it's one thing if you miss a pass. It's another thing if you fumble. It's one thing if you take a sack you didn't need to. It's another thing if you throw a pick. So
it's another thing if you get suspended.
Well, yeah, yeah, that's definitely another thing. Even that's a whole other element to this equation, as you can obviously tell. So with that said, I mean, A&M Saturday, we don't know yet. I have a feeling you're going to see both kids. Well, Wigman is more of a veteran. It's not right to call him a kid. But so with that said, and again, I know, as you mentioned, you don't get to scout every game like you would when you were coaching. But is there any thoughts on the matchup as a whole?
Well, I've looked at it over and over and over. And, I mean, honestly, I have to give Texas A&M the edge. But I think this is a good matchup for South Carolina. And mainly because of the quarterback thing, it's a headache for Clayton. You got to kind of have two attitudes ready to go. And within your package, you better have some adjustments, which LSU obviously didn't have the other day, and just be ready to roll. But Wegman's going to have a hard time because he's not really mobile. Same thing happened to Kentucky. Same thing that Carolina gave Musmeyer some problems for a long time during that game. If you're not extremely mobile, you're going to have a hard time against South Carolina's front. So then they may have to go to the other kid. And the other day may have been a flash in the pan. I don't know, because he didn't do anything close to that when they played him early in the season. So it's going to be interesting. I mean, they got a problem with the two quarterback thing as much as preparing for them is. I looked at a lot of statistics and things in the conference, and they're not far apart on anything, hardly. The one thing that Texas A&M is really good on, they can run that football. And so I think the biggest key is going to be whether Carolina can stop that running game at least well enough to put the game back on the quarterback's shoulders. Because, and I think the second thing is which team can make the other team's quarterback make mistakes. Mm-hmm. And of course, I know Carolina's guy is really young, but I think, Texas A&M's quarterback situation is potentially just as shaky as South Carolina for different reasons.
You touched on something there that begs a follow-up. So we're probably going to see Marcel Reed and Connor Wigman, two different types of quarterbacks, two different types of skill sets, two different types of experience. So when you had this situation, and I'm sure you had it multiple times during your time at Carolina and other spots, how did you divvy up that time, that precious practice time in preparation when you knew you had to prepare for two different guys?
You took your package in and you just knew certain things you did want to do against one of them and certain things you wanted to make sure you did against the other one. I don't know that it makes you bring two packages to the game. It just makes you be sure you got a little answer for this guy, mobile guy, and be sure you have a way to attack this other guy and have it in the plan and make sure you rep it at least enough that kids know what they're doing. That's all you can do. But I look at it two different ways. I mean, if they make that change during the game, it's because you made them make that change. Okay. So it's it's not easy, but I think it's just as much of a problem. How is Texas A&M giving both kids enough time this week in practice? Right? And they got to be scratching their head because Wegman came back 2-3 games ago and put balance back in their offense, and they were hard to handle there for a week or two. And all of a sudden now, he got in a problem with Wegman couldn't get out of trouble. They were knocking him around, banging him around. He's throwing bad footballs. I mean, all of a sudden they got a problem because he's not mobile enough and they can't protect him. So if the running game hadn't run for 200 plus, might have been a different outcome.
Yeah, Wegman had a tough time in this building 2 years ago, the first time and only time that Carolina Xavier Legette took his shoe off and ran down the sideline for a touchdown to open that game. Stephen, are you still good, or do you need to go? I know you got things going.
Yeah, I kind of need to roll.
Okay, I'll let you say your well wishes to Coach Johnson, and we'll get you out of here. Go ahead.
Yeah, Coach, man, just it's always great seeing you, and we're gonna get you on the podcast here sooner rather than later. I'm actually coming up to Columbia this weekend. Where are you living at now?
I'm living up here outside of Clemson.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll link up sooner or later, man. But yeah, we'll definitely get you on a podcast soon, and do my dad a favor so he stops freaking texting me and just give him a call. He's driving me nuts. He's texted me like 4 or 5 times, like, "Hey, man, make sure you get Coach Johnson to call me."
Well, there's a reason he does that.
Oh, I know.
Sometimes you need to be told more than once, Steve.
Trust me, I know.
Hey, man.
Cool.
But you know what? Anytime you get in trouble with just telling Pops apple trees grow apples. I like to say.
Exactly. 1,000%.
Stephen, I'll see you on Saturday, man.
Beautiful.
Always appreciate it, and yeah, I'll give me a shout on the way up. I'll see you Saturday.
Yeah, sounds good. All right, boys, we'll see y'all later.
Thanks, man.
Good to see you, Dave.
Hey, Coach, I want to ask you. Shoot, we've got to squeeze a quick break in here, Coach. Can you hold for like 2 minutes and 30 seconds? Is that all right?
Fine. I'm fine. My phone is about to drive me crazy, but I'm fine.
Okay, we'll squeeze in a quick break, and then we'll come back for about another 10 minutes with you, and we'll get you out of here. And everybody hang tight. Hey, Coach Ellis Johnson will rejoin here on ITG.
Hey, this is Cornbread Cowboy, and you're listening to the show. We'll be right back.
Morning, Carl. Usual?
Yeah.
Your oldest was in here the other day. Said the two of you took a trip down to my neck of the woods. How'd that go?
You might as well give me one of those Carolina cars while you're at it.
I knew I liked that one.
Yeah.
There you go, my friend.
Thanks.
Hey, Carl. Congratulations.
See you tomorrow, Freddie.
You bet.
Final segment, hour 2. Coach Ellis Johnson still joining us. This segment brought to you by our friends at Gamecock Traditions, GamecockTraditions.com. Wear black on Saturday. If you need something new, step into Gamecock Traditions. Reminder as well, coming up at the top of the 1 o'clock hour, nationally recognized platinum selling band 1,000 Horses joins us here alongside Coach Chad Holbrook. So we'll get you out here in just a couple minutes, Coach. I know Mike's got a couple of things for you. Mike, if we're asking the same question here, you just stop me and ask it how you want to ask it.
Okay.
I was going to ask him about how he would scheme up South Carolina's offense. It's last in the country in sacks allowed. Young quarterback.
Oh, I like that one. I did not have that one. Let's go. Let's start with that one.
Yeah. Your thoughts on that, Coach? Your thought? How would you play those guys?
Well, I don't know. You can take the approach. You got a young quarterback. Let's get after him. Or you could play, more zone and just he's going to have a harder time reading zone. If you bring pressure, you play man. You make his decision for him. And my person would be very concerned about him getting out and with his feet beating you with the pressure idea. And you bring it all to the stadium, and then you go with what you think, and then if you have to adjust, you can. But protection has been a problem for him. But when you got an athletic quarterback, he can hopefully help himself a little bit too. I think, again, the key is going to be whether they can get Texas A&M off the field often enough. And if they can't run the football like they did last week, like Texas A&M did last week, then I think Carolina's going to be in a good situation. It looked like to me that the last game they took their eye out of the ball the second half. And one of the reasons there were no turnovers or bad plays is they didn't ask him to do a lot that last 30 minutes. And it worked out for them because Oklahoma's a bad football team. Let's just face it. I mean, the one thing that concerns me, South Carolina's got 2 SEC wins, and those 2 teams combined have won 2 SEC games. They've lost 9 games between them. And so they're not good football teams. And it's still important wins because they won both of them on the road. And you beat an SEC team on the road, I don't care who it is, you've done a good job. But they played with a couple of teams in LSU and Alabama And Ole Miss is certainly right at the top half of the conference and on up there in the top 2 or 3. So, it's just what it is inconsistency in its youth. And I just think the least they can ask LaNorris to do mentally, he can handle the rest with his feet if he'll just take care of the football.
That is a terrific analysis. And I really, well, two things. To your point, Carolina's done a great job of getting out to early leads this season. In almost every conference game, the exception was Ole Miss. And one of the things we talked about with a couple of our guests is, well, how would Carolina look, again, with a redshirt freshman quarterback when when all of a sudden you're down 10 points? How do you respond? Well, in the Ole Miss game, the response wasn't great, right? I mean, the team just kind of went into a downward spiral, which is not uncommon. So that to me would be important. And I think you're right in that the last thing you want to see is A&M just start to ground and pound and get 4 yards, 5 yards a clip. It's going to be a long day if that happens. But I think both these defenses will key on that, jam it up, and whoever's able to throw the ball with any type of success might be the winning team. With that in mind, and Craig kind of stole my thunder in the chat box. I was thinking the same thing. I watched that LSU game when Reed came in. He only threw 2 passes. So everybody in the stadium knew it was probably going to be a run, but their ends, LSU's ends, which are not as good as Carolina's ends, and you see this all the time, and it drives me crazy. They'll be so determined to do what they normally do, which is beat their guy and just rush outside, and then you just leave wide open running lanes for a running quarterback. So what do you tell your guys in that situation when you're facing a guy like Marcel Reed? Do you tell your ends to, have more integrity when it comes to that and not just do it as if you were rushing a pocket passer?
Yeah, I mean, the one of them's young. I don't know how old the other one transferred from Georgia Tech. Anyhow,
Kennard, yeah.
That also hurt him against LSU. They got those early sacks. They were hitting Nussmeier. The next thing you know, LSU just starts running the football, and a lot of the successful runs were up through what we call a B gap. Mm-hmm. Because all the tackle had to do was punch out, and that thing was wide open. Right. And then you've got SEC running backs in there on the secondary. So that hurt them in that game, and also in this last game, Texas A&M showed they will do that too. So I think that is important. But when a young player has 2 or 3 successful plays, it's kind of like tasting blood, and he wants to keep doing it, and you have to kind of. I don't think it's a scheme. I think, they're probably just not playing the technique consistently. It's not just the defensive ends, though. When you start having problems on the edge, sometimes it's, run support. And sometimes you got something going on where you want that defensive end to chase the inside run and scrape over the top with the linebackers. So it's not always just the defensive ends. But Texas A&M's problem, though, is they don't have that weapon when the starter's on the field. He's more of a technician, if you will. And if he has to throw in the pocket, then they're gonna get to him. Sooner or later, they're gonna get to him. Now, I do think there's a tremendous difference in how many sacks A&M's given up and how many sacks Carolina's given up. And if that becomes a factor, then A&M's got the edge on that too. But I just think it goes back to stopping their running game.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're awfully stout. I mean, they've got good backs. They got a very physical offensive line. But I would think Carolina would match up well there because, I mean, not only do you have your front 4, but you got Debo, you got linebackers making plays, you got safeties making plays. So I have just been a prime believer that this Carolina defense can match up against anybody. But this will be another kind of unique test.
I agree with that 100%. And they've proved it. They get turnovers, they get negative yardage plays, and then it really just feeds back into their strength. Mm-hmm. So, but you can't ask them to do too much. That's kind of what happened with LSU. They had LSU on the ropes, and really struggling. But then all of a sudden, they couldn't get them off the field in the running game. So it's I don't think A&M's front is as good as LSU's offensive line. But I do think they got better running backs, and if they can get them to the second level, it's going to be a problem.
Do you see big picture wise? I mean, the Georgia Alabama game withstanding, offense is down in a lot of these games. Defenses are really causing havoc, and you're not seeing the passing displays that we've seen before. You've got guys that are first round talents. Carson Beck struggling. I mentioned the hotshot freshman like Nico, $2 million a year, whatever it is, struggling. Quinn Ewers has struggled at times. Milroe has struggled at times. Nussmeier just threw 3 picks in a game, and some people will tell you he's as good of a pure passer as there is. So just how much are the defenses catching up right now, at least in the Southeastern Conference?
Well, what I think, and this is sort of just a guess, but a lot of the stuff that offenses were doing, it goes in cycles, and the RPOs had the defensive guys, had us kind of cautious, if you will. We were trying to play more read defense and not give up big plays. And I think now they've kind of gotten an idea of how these things, how they executed and so forth, probably even playing against it in spring practice. And I see defenses being more aggressive now. They're attacking the RPOs instead of trying to sit back and don't let them get a big play. And so that attack mentality is getting pressure to the quarterbacks on both the run pass option stuff and the pocket. And that's the whole thing about passing game. I mean, over the years I've learned you have a million of these exotic coverages. You got to get the ball out of the quarterback's hands, and you got to hit the quarterback. And we always counted and told the kids, now we're going to count how many times he has to get up in the first half. Don't tell me about sacks. I'm going to see how many times that quarterback has to get up off the ground in the first half, because it's just logical. They get tired. They're not as accurate. They get hit pretty good. You know, they may have got something hurting. Maybe their ribs are hurting a little bit. Maybe their shoulder's sore. Maybe you might have hurt one of them's neck. And all those things bother a throwing motion. And so it's just common sense. You've got to get the quarterbacks. And that's why the pros have all these rules so that you can't touch them, because it'll ruin the viewing product. You know, they're protecting the Hollywood star out there, because quarterbacks are gone. Nobody's going to watch NFL football. So it's not quite that bad in college. And I think the more that you can get that quarterback on the ground early in the game, the more plays you're going to get out of him, or bad plays you're going to get out of him on the defensive side.
It's so interesting to hear you talk about getting the quarterbacks need to get the ball out of their hands. Michael Flint talks about that all the time with us, and John Strickland. This Carolina offense, something that could probably help them. Go to the quick game, get him out of the pocket and reset it, and maybe they'll start moving the football. Y'all talked about earlier how you pull it down too quick. And if you got a kid like that who is not sure what he's seeing, and it ain't clicking up here because he's young and he's got feet, I wouldn't encourage it, but I wouldn't coach that out of him, because if he gets 12 yards running the football, that's a heck of a lot better than throwing it incomplete or throwing it to the wrong team. And so, you're looking at the film on Sunday, you're like, look at this post route he left out there. Look at this in route that he didn't allow it to clear. Look at this, look at that. Well, okay, but he's not ready for that yet. Maybe he just can't see that. And the ones that force it most of the time, they learn by doing that. But if you're not a really good football team, you can't turn it over 3 times and still win. And so I think sometimes you got a guy like Sellers, don't berate him when he pulls it down on the pass. That's the way Connor was early on. He used to drive Coach crazy, but he gradually got to where he understood how to coach a scrambling quarterback. And the thing that the coordinator's trying to do, like a Coach Spurrier, he's trying to set plays up. So the quarterback gets off the tracks and takes off running for 7 or 8 yards and doesn't let the play develop. You can't call the next play based on what you saw them do. You're not building as the game goes on. But it is what it is. I mean, if he can beat him with his feet, then beat him with his feet. Don't give the ball away.
I have a feeling LaNorris's feet will be a big factor on Saturday as well. Ellis, you always are terrific. Our last session on this show was one of our most listened to. You've been very gracious to me over the years during my time doing shows in Columbia, and we always look forward to our next appearance with you. So thank you so much for taking out the time. Enjoy the games on Saturday. Stop those loan collectors from calling you, please. Hit that do not disturb button. Yeah, you paid him enough money over the years, I'm sure. Just leave Ellis alone, for crying out loud.
He's paid his tax bill, I think.
Exactly.
Every one of those calls were unmarked calls. I mean, you know what they're for. Either want money donated to them or you've done something wrong. You're overdue.
That's right.
It's election season, Coach. They all want their vote.
Or a vote.
No
yeah. Send that sucker to voicemail. Ellis, thank you so much again. And I said, we will talk to you again before too long for sure.
That's right.
Enjoy it, guys. It's always fun. Y'all do a great job.
Thank you. And get on with Pat and Stephen. Get on with Pat and Stephen soon.
I've asked him 10 times. Did y'all see that damn commercial they did premiering, I guess you'd say, the show?
Mm-hmm.
The two guys sitting there at a bar drinking a beer. There's no girl in sight. They're supposed to be two casual guys out in the evening for a beer. And I texted them. I said, "This is ridiculous. Y'all are so phony." They had one of these food craft beers, I'm thinking, good. Nobody's going to believe that.
Oh, man.
That's a great point. Oh, man.
Tell them to work on that.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Let's help them out with their next promo already.
Director of Marketing, Coach Ellis Johnson.
Yeah.
Right.
Ellis, thanks again, man.
Thanks, Coach.
We'll definitely do it
Enjoyed
again
it.
soon. You got it.
Okay, thanks, guys.
That's former Gamecock defensive coordinator Ellis Johnson.